here at the Coalition. Yes, welcome. And we have Allison Eisinger, our Executive Director, Hallie Willis, our Community Policy Manager. Danielle Palmer Friedman, our Communications Lead, is unable to join us today, so we wish her well, and we'll see her next time. And we have Noah Guter, our Operations and Systems Manager, and we are so happy to have you with us today. The Coalition is a member-based organization, and this meeting is meant to bring people together, service providers, community and government partners, and allies alike. We come together every month in the spirit of building community, exchanging important information and timely information, offering professional development skills and resources, and last but not least, really working to create a sense of solidarity amongst ourselves. So we're really glad to have you with us today. If we could move to the what we do slide, please. We have this beautiful slide that goes a little bit more into detail about what we do and who we are, and so I encourage you to take a look. We are recording this meeting, as I mentioned earlier. It will live in our YouTube channel and space forever, so if I can have somebody drop a link to our YouTube channel in the chat at some point. Please check that out if you aren't already subscribed. We record all of our meetings and all of our trainings. There's a wealth of information there for folks. So again, encourage you to check that out and subscribe to the channel. We love to see faces. So if you're in a place to, or you're able to put your camera on and that feels appropriate today, please do so. We love to see faces. I always like to say, you know, even if you have your camera on for a minute, but you got to turn it off, that's fine. No pressure to keep it on the whole time once you have it on. But of course, if you're in a place and you're able to do that today, that's great. Oh, you also have the ability to change your name in the little Zoom box. So we'd love to know who you are, what your pronouns are, how you might be connected to the coalition or this work. If you are with the media today, we really just ask that you quote and pull information from either coalition staff or our official partners. And if there is someone else that you are hoping to connect with, please reach out to contact@homelessinfo.org, and we will connect you with that agency for follow-up. And for our next link, if I could have somebody put the link to our email sign up in the chat. Presumably you have it because you are here, but we also know that Zoom links get shared with folks and we want people to have direct access. So yes, that way you can share with the rest of your colleagues and communities. And on that note, if we can move back to the agenda slide, please. So like I mentioned, a packed agenda. Oh, is there an additional item that somebody had? Okay. We are really excited for our agenda today. We have as part of our legislative debrief, we have elected officials as guest speakers to share some of their thoughts on challenges and successes from the session, and of course to share some insights. And as always, there will be an opportunity for advocacy and action during this meeting. So watch out for that. We will get to that pretty quickly. As let's see. This is our annual meeting, of course, and so we do want to spend a little bit of time reflecting on the work that we all did collectively, which will be interactive and with prizes. And last but not least, as we do every year at our annual meeting, dues-paying coalition members will be receiving the approved slate of board candidates to be voted on by the end of the week. And to close, we are going to be sharing really good information and important information with you based on the coalition's work. And we always invite you to share what you have going on in your world with us and everyone else here. So with that, I would like to ask somebody to volunteer to read our mission and vision and values.
And you might want to go back to the slide. There we go. That has that. Thank you so much. We'd love to invite anybody who hasn't had a chance to read the mission, vision, and value statements previously to volunteer to do so. And if you're a candidate for service on the Coalition's Board of Directors and you're here, you'd be warmly welcome to raise your hand or unmute and do that.
Let's see here. I'm not finding the raise my hand function, but I'll
Oh,
just
thank you,
say it.
Scott. You're speaking. That's good enough. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
So the mission, we mobilize our community to challenge systemic causes of homelessness and advocate for housing justice. The vision, a region that acts on a shared sense of responsibility to ensure that everyone has a home. The values, equity, justice, collective action.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you,
We
Scott. Oh, sorry, Allison, go ahead.
I just wanted to say we really warmly welcome Scott and everyone else to reflect on these at the beginning of each membership meeting. This is something the coalition has been doing for years. We updated our mission and added a vision and value statement just before the pandemic hit. So these were the result of a lengthy series of conversations and planning work that we all did together. And we really invite you to give us your thoughts about this mission, vision, and values in this current moment. And we've got a little portion of our agenda in which I'll be talking a little bit more about how we're going to invite you to give us your updated temperature check thoughts about these. And now I think we have a couple of quick announcements about upcoming training and a really fun community event in the North End that we'd like to invite you to join us for.
Yes, thank you, Allison. So yes, the training. Our next training is the Medicare and Medicaid training. It's part of the benefits. It's part of our public benefits, our key series. This is really geared towards case managers, direct service providers, uh, any people who are supporting folks in either navigating, accessing Medicare and Medicaid, or trying to just stay on it. And so we know it's a very complicated process. This is in in partnership with Solid Ground Benefits Legal Assistance. So there are attorneys in that training giving really great information. The other announcement is and that is on May 20th. So please register. That is next Tuesday. Our other announcement is for a fundraiser put on by the Watershed Pub and Kitchen. We'll put a link in the chat as well for that. It's a Facebook event link, but you don't need an account to be able to see it. The Watershed Pub is putting on a fundraiser series, and the week of May 28th, they will be highlighting the Coalition on Homelessness, and some proceeds from that will be coming to the coalition. So if this is an opportunity for you and your staff to be in community, come together, and also spend some time with us, coalition staff will be there. We're very excited, and hopefully we get a chance to meet in person. Okay, and so with that, let's move on to the next piece of our agenda.
Thanks, Kevin. The next piece of our agenda is fun and games. Because when you put me in charge of a piece of the agenda, I'm going to try and make you play games. So we have prepared some Jeopardy for you. And this is to celebrate, things that we've done in the last year, and also just to highlight just some of the awesome stuff that our community has done together. And this is it's gonna look like Jeopardy, but it's gonna work a little different, because if we were gonna do Jeopardy on Zoom, it would take 100 years. So one quick rule before we get started is that the chat is off limits. You may not put answers in the chat because that will break the game. You must raise your hand if you want to answer a question, and use your voice. The way this is going to work is I'm going to select the question, so you'll see the question, and then you'll have an opportunity to raise your hand, and we'll just start from the top. Okay, let's get started. And hopefully you can see this normal. So the first category is get to know your coalition for 100. I'm going to open up the question, and if you answer it correctly, please send Kevin a direct message with your name and mailing address, because we have tiny little prizes for you that we'd like to send to you. Okay, so here we go. Raise your hand if you want to answer this question. Get to know your coalition. In 2024, we helped provide these to over 1,600 kids experiencing homelessness through Project Cool. Tina. Oh, you're not mute. You're muted, Tina. Yeah.
Backpacks? Yes.
Backpacks. Yes. Backpacks and more. Backpacks, books, school supplies, and dental hygiene kits to help kids get ready for school. Awesome. Tina, if you want a prize, you can DM Kevin with your mailing address that you'd like us to send it to. Awesome. Okay, now we know how it works. Great. Get to know your coalition for 200. The coalition provides many free trainings for service providers and community members on topics like these. Your hint is that there are many correct answers for this one, so we could have multiple winners.
Another hint is I may have just made an announcement about one of these free trainings for service providers and community members.
I think since the chat is off limits, we might need to make sure that if people can't unmute themselves, they have some way of indicating that.
Medicare,
Yeah, I mean, you can put
Medicaid.
stuff like that
There
in the
you go.
chat, but
Lisette,
you can't answer a question. You can't answer the question in the chat, so don't do that.
okay. You have a response though, Hallie.
Yes, Medicare, Medicaid. That is one of the many things that we do trainings for. We also do lots of other trainings for connecting clients with public benefits. We did a special training recently with over 200 people on what to do if immigration enforcement comes to the door of your service site. We do advocacy trainings. We do trainings on helping homeless students, as well as voting rights and registration. So
You also had the alphabets.
Yeah, there's so much. Yeah. Okay. Our hardest question for Get to Know Your Coalition. The coalition currently has 59 of these that inform our advocacy, lend power to our collective voice, and house, shelter, and care for thousands of people in our community.
Community resources.
That I'm going to give that to you. That is close enough, Beatrice. I'm going to say that's close enough. We have 59 dues-paying member organizations,
Right.
which are indeed wonderful community resources in our community. So Beatrice, go ahead and DM Kevin with your info if you want us to mail you a prize. Well done. Okay, out and about for 100. In 2024, coalition volunteers and staff helped over 800 people across different King County service sites to participate in this important civic activity. Barbara, I see you. Raise your hand, Barbara, and say it.
Voter registration.
Yes, ma'am. Voter registration and knowing voting rights. And we have a lovely picture of Miss Jody, who did a lot of this work with us. Well done, Barbara. We know where you live. We'll mail you a prize. Okay, out and about for 200. I'm just checking on time really quick. We'll do a few more. We brought allies, service providers, and people with lived experience of homelessness to Olympia for this annual event to support rent stabilization and other important bills. You can get a meaningless bonus point if you can name the bus that took us there. So the name of the event and the name of the bus.
An advocacy day.
Yes, ma'am. Advocacy Day, Housing and Homelessness Advocacy Day. The name of the bus, of course, is the Advocacy Express, that we took all of these lovely people to Olympia with us just about a couple months ago. Well done. Melanie, you're allowed to answer these questions, by the way. I see you out here. All right. How much more time do we have for this? Let's see. We'll do a couple more. Out and about for 200. Oh, sorry. We already did that one. Coalition staff, allies, and co-plaintiffs spent Valentine's Day 2025 in this unromantic location. And there's a hint planted in this prompt as well. Stuart, I see you thinking. You have a guess? Barbara?
The coalition office?
I guess,
I
yeah,
see
for
a
part of the
thumbs
day,
up.
yeah, I guess we would have been in the office.
I see
We
a
spent
thumbs up from
Valentine's Day in court
Oh,
for our arguments in our case against the city of Burion's banishment ordinance. My little hint was that we spent Valentine's Day with our co-plaintiffs. That was a hard one, I know.
for those that did, I think I saw a couple raised hands. If you knew the answer, feel free to send me an address that you'd like me to send the prize to.
Yeah. We trust you. Okay. Raise your voice is our last category. We'll start with 100. During the legislative session, we helped over 1,500 people to do this, a quick and easy way to speak up. If you're on my mailing list, I would have asked you to do this thing a bunch of times, and I will ask you to do it again in this very meeting. Melanie Smith, I'm going to put you on the spot because you know this answer.
email your lawmaker.
Yes, ma'am. Email your elected officials in the Washington State Senate, House of Representatives, and as well as the governor. Okay. Perfect. We've got just enough time for these last two. The coalition helps people speak up, including in person at this recurring Friday event where we organize people on a rainy day to speak out against proposed cuts to HUD. It's made it into the Seattle Times. There's a picture of me looking very cold.
Maybe you should show the picture.
I can't, the picture is like in with the answer, so I can't do
Gotcha.
that quite yet. Let's see if we can get a guess. This one's a tough one, I know. This is an event that's helped organized by the Troublemakers. It was held at the Federal Building down in Seattle.
Yes, this is the demonstration at the Federal
Yes.
Building. That's, yeah.
Exactly. This Federal Building Fridays. If anybody wants to join, these are recurring midday Friday event protesting the evil actions of our current federal administration. And we landed in the Seattle Times for this. Allison doesn't like this picture, so I'll take it away. Okay, our last and hardest question for Raise Your Voice. For the first time in a few years, we helped run a bill. Rep. Mia Gregerson's House Bill 1380 didn't pass yet, but it would require local laws to be objectively reasonable if they govern these essential human activities. Again, multiple correct answers. Also related to our lawsuit in Burien. Barbara, I see you.
It has to do with homeless, moving people and taking them off the streets and in all the time.
Exactly.
Forever.
Yeah. So this bill would require local laws to be reasonable if they govern things like sitting, lying down, sleeping, or keeping warm and dry in public places. We'll give it to you, Barbara. That was close enough.
Well, yes.
Well, thanks everyone. I had fun and I hope you had fun too. And with that, I think, let me stop my share and I think I'm passing it off to Allison.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Hallie. Great. Yes, thank you very much. I don't know why Hallie would not allow us to use the Jeopardy song in this activity.
It wasn't that I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to like screen share and have the song and have all the things happening at once. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of that. I just like I finished this like last night, and so I just
Well, thank you so much. I want to just bring us all together to recognize and acknowledge that that this is a great example of what we, the coalition staff, try to do with and for all of you, our members and partners. And invite you, if you're in a place to do this, to turn on your camera, because these meetings being held remotely are very convenient and useful and include a lot of people who might not otherwise be able to attend an in-person meeting, but they really do deprive us of some of the joy and pleasure of being in community and in solidarity with each other and getting to know each other, not only names and faces, but personalities and work and feelings. And right now, what we are trying to do is to balance the need for joy and information sharing, whether it's through a Jeopardy game or through singing a song on the Advocacy Express bus to thank our fabulous bus driver for getting us to Olympia and back safely. We really do try to enjoy doing this work, not only because we think that it is meaningful and important, but because the people who do this work are some of the most wonderful people you could ever meet. And I think folks here have probably experienced that in your work and volunteer and personal lives. So we are also in an extraordinarily dark, difficult time. And that's part of why we need deliberately to cultivate the joy, to play games, to use music, even disco music, to give ourselves some reminders of the fact that we can cultivate solidarity and hope in hard times. And also, we are not Pollyannas. We understand just how extraordinarily difficult this is, and frankly, that things are likely to get far worse, especially for folks experiencing homelessness and housing instability and the people who work with and for them, than they are now. And that's a pretty crummy thing to have to say, but we also really believe in speaking the truth, no matter how unpleasant or uncomfortable it is, because that's the way that we prepare ourselves. That's the way that we think strategically together. And that's the way that we do our best advocacy, among other things, by insisting that local decision makers, lawmakers, budget writers take seriously the real threats to the housing stability, rent, healthcare coverage, Social Security, and other benefits that are being threatened and in some cases already cut. So we're balancing the darkness and the light, and we are also recognizing that this is a pretty extraordinary organization. I really think every day that it is quite amazing to get to work at the Seattle-King County Coalition on Homelessness. We do get to speak the truth to power, and it's because of all of you. And it's because of our member organizations and our donors and our volunteers and the people who work in other places where they might not have such freedom of motion, who share information with us and who tell us that they feel the solidarity and they also want to be free to do the right thing. So we have an unusual structure. We are a membership-based organization, and we are really excited in a little bit here to invite our dues-paying member organizations to start a week of voting for a slate of 4 terrific candidates for our board of directors. But we're also going to call the governor and make sure that Governor Bob Ferguson signs the budget and the revenue bills that are necessary to make the budget balance into law, because even though the legislative session is over, the budget has not yet been signed, and many bills, including the revenue bills, remain to be signed. So those are the two pieces really of what we do. And I really want to invite all of you to join me in however you wish to just take a look through and recognize and appreciate and thank these organizations that have made sure that collectively we are a true coalition that can speak more powerfully because we are together than any one individual person or organization can. And the mission that Scott kindly read at the beginning of our meeting is a mission that can only be advanced through the collective power and work of not only these organizations, but the people who live in and work at and volunteer at these organizations. Together, we work to challenge the systems that cause and contribute to homelessness, and together we work to advocate for housing justice. Thank you to all of the people at these organizations, not only the ones who sign the membership checks, but the ones who do the other parts of membership: show up, speak up, inform us, take action, care for people, push the boundaries of what is considered good enough, and really help to do the work of housing, shelter, safety, justice, and community, even in really hard times. So we're doing a virtual round of applause for all these organizations. And if your organization isn't on there, hey, we know sometimes things might fall through the cracks. Kevin Lee is more than happy to talk with you about making sure that you get your dues pledged or paid in time to be able to participate, not only in our board of directors election, but also in things like Project Pool, which this year is on track to serve 1,700 children experiencing homelessness in our local public schools, the biggest number I think we may have ever had. But also our voting rights and voter registration work that will be gearing up for the August primary and the November general election. Okay, I think I'm going to ask maybe if that beautiful, beautiful slide can come down for the moment. This is a rolling membership due, so if you didn't see yourselves on there, once again, it's not too late. Thank you so much for the person managing the slides. And I want to just move us into a little bit of a reflection about what that mission, vision, and values call us to do in this moment. We are seeing enormous uncertainty and hostility at the federal level. And we know that the budgets, we'll be hearing about the state budget from State Representative Nicole Macri, State Representative Sean Scott, and State Senator Emily Alvarado. There is good and bad in the state budget. We also know that the city of Seattle and King County are facing structural budget deficits that are going to affect our folks and the work that you all do. So in the face of that, in the face of threats to our democracy, what is it that we want to use this coalition to do? I think we have a slide that shares a little bit of some input that we got last fall from a survey where we just invited people to tell us, what do you look to the coalition for? And people gave us all sorts of really interesting responses just to give us a little bit of guidance about what folks are looking to us to do. You know, sometimes I say to people, we know if we're doing a good job because people show up and are hungry for the information, the resources, the training, and the solidarity that we offer. We're going to ask you, you can do this either right now or you can do this at your leisure. We'll send this out after the meeting today and we'll keep this open for a couple of weeks. But we're going to ask you to answer that question, what do you look to the coalition for, as well as just a couple of other pretty open-ended questions. When the coalition is at its best, fill in the blank. And what do you think is the most important thing for the coalition to do in this moment? That's going to help us as staff and board to, as I said, get a temperature check, as well as make our own contingency plans and potentially make some changes to what we focus on and what we put our resources behind as we join you in fighting for what we hold dear, in working to protect as many people as possible, as fiercely as we can, and in working for a much, much better, stronger response to the housing unaffordability and homelessness crises that were bad before this election and are indeed under this regime likely, sadly, tragically, to get worse. So that's our request to you all. You can fill this out anonymously, you can share your information, you can pass it on to others whom you work with. And I really thank you all so much. I know we need to move into the next part of our agenda, but I just want to see if anyone has any questions or thoughts that you want to quickly share. Okay. All right. So once upon a time, this coalition was a group of volunteers 46 years ago who got together to do all kinds of things, to meet, to share information, to organize the one-night count of people experiencing homelessness, to allocate tiny amounts of emergency shelter grant money. And then after 27 years, the coalition actually hired a part-time temporary staff person. So here we are in 2025, and we actually have been incorporated as a 501c3 nonprofit for 9 years. And that includes having filed under Washington state law to be a membership organization. And our membership organization does some things under the guidance and leadership of our board of directors. So at our annual membership meeting, we welcome and introduce to you all our board of directors and, the candidates to join the board of directors. And this gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the 4 folks who are among a large number of wonderfully qualified and passionate people who contacted us this year to apply to serve. And I want to say very clearly, we had an extraordinarily difficult time selecting a small number of people because we really appreciate and need all the volunteer leadership we can get. So we are following up with everybody who applied to invite them to stay in touch and to consider joining us in other ways and potentially joining the board at a future date. Carissa Johnson is currently working at the Habitat for Humanity for King County, and she brings with her a lot of experience setting up homeowner association boards of directors and helping to advocate for affordable home ownership across our region. She also has personal experience of homelessness and housing instability, and she is a passionate advocate in her community and brings really important and additional perspective to the board. Diana Pierce, some of you may recognize some of these names. Diana Pierce is an emerita faculty person at the University of Washington School of Social Work. I first met her when she came as a guest lecturer many years ago to Seattle, speaking about the Self-Sufficiency Index, which is an alternative, a reality-based alternative to the poverty level that she has developed that is in use actually across the country. And she brings with her a wealth of experience and knowledge about poverty, feminization of poverty, and housing instability. So we've got a little bit more about each one of these people on the slate of candidates. And I think Kevin or Hallie, if you can drop the link in there, even if you're not a voter, you can read about them. Thank you that way. Catherine Ravello currently works at Plymouth Housing. Many years ago, 12 years ago to be precise, she actually did her MSW practicum with the Coalition on Homelessness, and among other things, came to Olympia with us on the Advocacy Express and organized over 50 teams for the Seattle headquarters of the One Night Count. Catherine has also worked with women experiencing homelessness and has a lot of experience and context in managing properties at Plymouth. And Scott Starr, thank you so much for joining us in person online today, Scott. Scott is a senior principal at SMR Architects, and SMR Architects is a very well-respected and well-known architecture firm that has designed and built beautiful buildings for people to live in and take shelter in all across our region, has collaborated with a number of the organizations that provide housing and shelter and services here in our community, and has actually stood up on a number of occasions to bring his professional and personal perspective to conversations about technical issues that that have sometimes been used as barriers to getting people into safety and housing. So we really, really appreciate each and all of these people for joining our board of directors. If you have any questions about whether or not your organization is voting, please reach out to Kevin. And please do take a little time to read about these folks. We're going to invite all of them to come join us at the June membership meeting. And Scott, since you're here right now, I want to just offer you a few minutes if you would like to, not to put you on the spot, you can pass until June. But I think I'll just say maybe take down the slide and see if Scott would like to just say a couple words about his willingness to serve in this leadership role.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
Let's see. Well, a little bit on the spot, but I'm excited to potentially join the board. And I've known about the coalition for a long time. As you know, SMR Architects is a architecture firm that specializes and has kind of a mission in providing low-income housing in sort of all of its various forms. We've done everything from emergency shelters or opioid treatment facilities and crisis diversion shelters to workforce housing, family, low-income family housing, and historic preservation that's related to housing and facilities for organizations that deal with unhoused people. And just sort of being involved with low-income housing, I've always noticed that if there's ever an issue that's being debated, a sort of crisis in the legislature, if there's a concern about whether or not the Housing Trust Fund is going to be adequately funded, or at least somewhat adequately funded, the Coalition on Homelessness is always there and always, lending their voice to whatever struggles are needed to help house people in the Puget Sound area. So I've always appreciated your work, and I've known Allison for a long time. We just sort of tend to show up in the same places.
Yes.
So, like I said, I'm very excited to be given the opportunity to be on the board.
Thank you so much, Scott. It's really wonderful to have you. I should note, for those who remember when we worked valiantly to try to secure the former Federal Reserve Bank building for homeless services use in our community, one of Scott's colleagues at SMR Architects was a powerful and incredibly hardworking ally, and the firm itself did an enormous amount of pro bono work. And the renderings of that are in our offices, Scott.
Oh, great.
So Thank you all so very much. We are definitely stronger together when, especially when we have folks who get it, who are willing to serve on the board and help guide us through tough times. So our transition now is we're going to take collective action. In addition to all the speaking up that we have going on locally, and we are going to take a little time later on to talk about the Tent City 4 situation. We have our wonderful contract lobbyist, Melanie Smith, here with us today. And Melanie has helped in innumerable ways throughout the course of this legislative session and previous sessions. And when we meet with Melanie, Hallie and I are often reminded of some of the basic facts, which have to do with how bills actually become laws. And I think we all know them, but it helps to be reminded. Even after they've passed the House and the Senate, they still need to be signed into law by the governor. And that includes the budget. And that includes the revenue bills that we urgently need. So I'm going to let Hallie give you the lowdown, and we are all going to let Bob Ferguson hear from us this morning before we then hear from our fabulous trio of state lawmakers about all the work they put into the budget and other bills.
Thanks, Allison. So this is just a little warm up for our legislative wrap up portion that's coming next. And you'll never be in a meeting with me or Allison where we don't ask you to take action. So here we are. You knew this was coming. We are gonna make some phone calls today. And if you're like me, you hate making phone calls, especially to strangers. And we're just gonna do it together, and it's gonna be fine. So we are going to call the governor to urge him to do two things. Number one, sign all the revenue bills that were passed by the state legislature. Number two, sign the budget. It's not perfect. It has a lot of cuts in it, even though it raised historic revenue. But if he doesn't sign it, it is almost guaranteed to get much, much worse. So we need to get this done with and make sure that all the funding that is in the budget to sustain homelessness services and to sustain shelter stays there. So we've got a little script for you, and I'm going to do two things. I'm going to put it in the chat, but that is like tiny and looks terrible. So I'm also, oh, and it's too long. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen and I'll figure that out in a minute. So please take out your cell phones, dial 360-902-4111, and we're going to leave some voicemails for our governor. And we know that his office is counting the number of people that contact him. So there's what, 43 of us here now. So that's 43 phone calls in favor of signing the budget and signing the revenue bills. If for whatever reason you can't get through on the phone, please send an email. I'll drop that link in the chat in a moment. And if you want extra credit, you can do both. Okay, so I'm going to mute myself. I'm going to maybe quietly play some music in a second, and we'll come back at 9:55.
just wait a while. The one I need is tied up right now. So let's not draw the line, 'cause I can't make my mind up right now. So let's just wait a while. The one I need is tied up right I will be the first in line to open up, so I don't mind. I will be the first in line to open up, so I don't mind to give you all. So let's get round to it. The one I need is tied up right now. So let's just wait a while. The one I need is tied up right now. So let's not draw the line, 'cause I can't make my mind up right now. So let's just wait a while. The one I need is tied up right. I know that I can be a few. I'll be myself, be myself. I'm told to be over the moon. I can teach myself, but I'm old. I can feel that it's true.
For Senator Alvarado and anyone else who might have just joined the meeting, what we're doing right now is calling and emailing Governor Bob Ferguson to urge him to sign the budget and the revenue bills that support it. So we'll be starting the legislator section of the agenda in about 1 minute.
Great job, everyone. I'm gonna leave this screen up just in case anybody is like in the middle of their phone call for just another minute or so. Well, we transition to the next part of our agenda, which is our legislative wrap up. And I'm so grateful to our fabulous state lawmakers for joining us. We've got Senator Emily Alvarado. I think I saw Representative Sean Scott hop on as well. Sean, are you here?
Yeah, sure am.
Thanks. Appreciate it. I was like Scott_SH. That must be Representative Scott. Okay. Thank you all so much for being here. We've also got Representative Nicole Macri joining us a little later at 10:30. For folks who maybe don't know these three lawmakers very well, they are some really excellent champions in the legislature for all things housing and homelessness. They have just gotten out of a really difficult legislative session, and we really, really appreciate them joining us today. Before we dive into asking them some questions, I also want to send some appreciation to our friends at the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance, who couldn't make it here today. They are really, really strong statewide advocacy partners of ours. If you're not already on their mailing list, I would definitely recommend that you join it. They were the organizing and advocacy muscle behind rent stabilization, and they deserve a huge amount of credit for that. I also want to send some appreciation to Melanie, who's here. She's our lobbyist. And Melanie is just like working the halls of Olympia for us all through the session, and super, super grateful for all of her work in talking to lawmakers and fighting for the things that we're fighting for, and also helping us to translate what's going on in Olympia so that we can share it with everybody else. So with that, I think we're going to start with Representative Sean Scott. Thank you so much for joining us. We're trying something new. We're doing this a little like interview style. So our first question for you is that you passed House Bill 1858 this year. Can you explain to folks, what does that mean for homeless shelters in King County and statewide?
Yeah, thanks so much, Kelly. It's great to be with you. It's great to be with everybody in the coalition space today. So, House Bill 1858 grew out of work that originated many years ago by recently departed Speaker Emeritus Frank Chop to assess document recording fee on real estate transactions in the state of Washington, and then to direct the monies resulting from those fees into various housing stabilization, low-income housing, shelters for people who are experiencing houselessness, housing services broadly defined in our state. When the document recording fee was first assessed, I believe that this was something like 2 decades ago. It was in the earlier mid-2000s. There was an unfortunate exemption that was contained within that language, a loophole that made it so that if you were if a property was being transferred between banks or to a bank, that fee would be not assessed. Everyday people who scrape and claw their way into home ownership pay the document recording fee. If somebody gets foreclosed upon, the document recording fee is likely to be paid. And so we, thought in the legislature that it was very unfair that large banks were not paying the document recording fee. And so what 1858 did was it closed that loophole and made it so that large financial institutions have to pay the same document recording fee that everyday people do. That move resulted in, or will result in, I should say, an increase of about $30,000 to $30 million, $30 million statewide into our Housing for All account, into various dedicated accounts that have been established to mitigate the impact of rising rents, to reduce houselessness in our state. Another share of that money, I ought to say, is going to go into the Covenant Homeownership Act, which is a related housing services account that has been established that helps first-time Black and Brown home buyers who are impacted by the long legacy of real estate segregation in our state. So about $60 million annually, 30, and those are split pretty evenly between the low-income housing services that I mentioned and the Covenant Homeownership Act. One example, I think, of many corporate loopholes that exist in our state that make it so that we're less likely to be able to fund basic services as a result of some pretty well-heeled financial institutions not paying their fair share in state revenues, taxes, and fees, et cetera.
Thank you so much. And can you just quickly talk a little bit about sort of why, like, what that meant for the document recording fees, like that we went into this session with a huge gap in document recording fees and what the risk there would have been.
Yeah, well, it's a really good question. The document recording fee is not a fixed stream of revenue in the sense that the amount that comes into it fluctuates based on the amount of real estate transactions we might see. So a document recording fee of I think it sits at somewhere around it might be $280 or something along those lines. Well, it means nothing if obviously in a given year, if there are literally no real estate transactions that happen, right? Just speaking figuratively. Conversely, in a different year where for whatever reason, there are more transactions, more real estate transactions, we would be bringing in a lot more. As a result of those ebbs and flows in real estate transactions in our state over the last several years, the projected amount of monies that would be coming into the state coffers as a result of the document recording fee had dipped to such an extent that the revenue no longer kept up with the projected expenditures that we would like to see for getting, people a roof over their heads, low-income housing services. So identifying this revenue source, which is really, once again, really, if you saw the legislation, I mean, it was literally just drawing a line through a section that exempted large corporations. Simply drawing that line made it so that the state is going to be that much less likely to have to scale back some of its efforts in the space of getting people housed and connecting people to services through housing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that was a really important piece of the sort of revenue puzzle that lawmakers had to put together this year. So can you tell, and I know that you fought really hard for progressive revenue, even more than what wound up in the final budget. What do you see as the path to get enough support for the level of truly progressive revenue? And when I say progressive revenue for folks, I'm talking about taxes that tax people according to their ability to pay. So taxes that tax, very wealthy people and very wealthy corporations more than the rest of us. So what do you see as the path to get that level of progressive revenue that we really need?
I think that's a very important distinction that you made, because I feel progressive is a much used word in many different contexts in our state. I feel that when many hear the term progressive revenue, they think that it's a reference to progressive as a value system and not progressive as a technical measure. Progressive revenue meaning when you have more resources, you pay more in state revenue or more in taxes relative to the amount that you have. Conversely, when you have fewer resources, you don't pay as much in taxes on your salad or more in taxes on the salad that you buy than a major corporation pays on certain services that it might be executing. So that's a really important distinction. I mean, what I would say, taking a step back, is that the state legislature managed to pass a record number of revenue in this legislative session, and under any other circumstance, passing something like $8.5 billion dollars worth of progressive revenue, I think would be a pretty big achievement. There were a number of taxes that were assessed on business and occupation, a large corporate tax, some others on services that I believe our finance team, and I serve on the finance committee in the House of Reps, had identified as being more likely to be frequented by sort of high earners, people who have more resources. And those, in combination with a few other revenue measures, made it so that we were able to stave off, we were able to not rely quite as much on brutal and draconian cuts to social services and other services that people really depend on in our state. As a matter of fact, a few state expenditures in areas like higher education via an adjustment to the Workforce Education Act were actually expanded. But I do not believe that we are in a position to celebrate all of the progress that was made. And though progress was made, it is taking place in the context of even more brutal cuts to the public sector that we're seeing from Washington, D.C., such that we're going to have a lot of work to do to make sure that we're filling in additional silos of reductions. I have been keeping up with great interest in the what the retraction of federal funds is going to mean to many state services in Washington state. The consensus right now is that cash assistance programs, higher education, and housing are sort of the three areas that are going to be most vulnerable to, the DOGE-led government, so-called government efficiency cuts that we're seeing from Washington, D.C. So that if we were serious as state lawmakers about taking on Trump, which is something that you will hear a lot of people often say, the action is going to have to come from identifying revenue sources that are going to fill in those three silos in particular. So, for example, this year we did not take action on implementing the real estate excise tax 2.0, which would have created an additional $1 billion of revenue for the Housing Trust Fund. That is something that I believe has to be on the menu next year. Protection or expansion of cash assistance programs, identifying a revenue source that can fund those programs. I believe that we might have one in a certain business and occupation technical fix to sort of the tax rate that some very large credit unions might pay. And then on the level of higher education, we already have a dedicated fund and revenue source that I think we want to continue to tweak and expand. So our work is not done. I feel as a rookie lawmaker just getting in my first year, one of the things that I've sort of heard from other lawmakers that joined their first session in a very difficult session is what it means is that you gain an appreciation for the work that can be done when times are a little bit less difficult. And so I think as our revenue forecast, starts to straighten out, as the revenues that we did raise this session start to pay dividends, we're going to have, and as long as voters in the 43rd LD say that they would like to have me return, these are projects that I would like to continue to expand on, particularly over the next 4 years as we're sort of dealing with the policy ramifications of what's happening in the other Washington.
Thank you. Yeah, that's so important to put all of this in context of the huge federal instability that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And for those future revenue bills that you mentioned that we're very excited to work with you on. That's great to hear. What do you want advocates to know about how we can support stuff like that going forward?
Well, I think we want to focus in as advocates and as activists, as organizers, as on the positive impact that the revenue that we would be raising would have. Mm-hmm. It's kind of our job and I really in a lot of ways think of myself as, somebody who's an advocate who just so happens to have been elected to this position. I know from many years working on the outside that one of the things that can galvanize people very well is when we're talking about the good that can come from the policies that we're fighting for, as opposed to attempting to sort of build our political case on a negative, which many people construe taxes to be. Let's talk about and make sure we're making the conversation about all the good that's going to come from all the low-income housing that we're going to build, making it so that people have more options and choices and where they can live, hopefully closer to work, so they're maybe reducing their carbon emissions. And we want to have these conversations in a way that brings people on board with what these revenues are going to do. And so that's one thing that I would say. I mean, people want to get involved in politics because it's aspirational. It's, we have a sense that our lives can be made better, and through collective action, we can get there. So we want to make sure that we're focusing in our rhetoric and in our talking points and in the way that we describe these issues, what it would mean to have housing for all in Washington state. What is it actually going to mean when we're making a concerted effort to end or significantly reduce the amounts of people who are experiencing houselessness? What does it mean when we can have more neighborhoods that have more housing options and childcare centers in the ground floors of those establishments? Think of how inclusive that will make our communities, how much stress that will remove from them. And when we move in that direction, I think our opponents will have a much harder time, because they're not going to be talking about why this or that tax is a bad thing, but they're going to have to be forced to talk about why they want our neighborhoods to be less inclusive, which maybe some of them do, but not quite as many of them as you would think want to actually say that out loud. So I think that's where the direction we might want to head in.
Thank you so much. I think that's amazing advice for all the folks that are on this call. And we're a little bit ahead of time, so I might just turn the floor over to you for the next 4 minutes or so until we welcome Senator Alvarado. But what else do you want people to know about what happened this session, or sort of what's on your radar for next year?
Well, I think I mean it's going to be a very interesting session next year because it's going to be a shorter one, number one, so that the work that we do in the interim with all of our advocates is going to be, you know, as important as ever. I also think that we're going to have an even better prepared legislature because, you know, you win these elections in November, the first week of November, and if you're a rookie lawmaker like I was last November, the onboarding process begins literally a week later, and you have about 8 weeks to figure out how to move to Olympia, but also split your time back in the district, the financial considerations of beginning a new job that, quite frankly, in the case of the legislature, often pays significantly less than the job it is that you may have left behind. There are considerations around just staying healthy during the legislative session, working it all out with your family and friends, significant others, etc. So that by the time you get to the beginning of legislative session, you already kind of feel like you've been in legislative session, you know, in that early January. That's going to be a little bit less of a hurdle next year for, I think, many lawmakers. So hopefully that's going to mean that we're going to be better equipped to, you know, meet some of the challenges that we're going to be facing. But, you know, as difficult as any individual lawmaker might have it on that front, it's nowhere near the difficulty that are facing, I think, some of the people that sent us to Olympia to address these problems. So, you know, I'm going to do my best to take quite seriously the amount of time that we have this interim to prepare, and you know, I think we'll be in good shape to take some of these problems on next year.
Thank you so much. And thank you for joining us. If you're able to stick around, that's great. We're going to have a bit of time at the end of this sort of interviewee piece for folks in the audience to ask questions. So if anybody has any questions percolating through your brain, you're welcome to put them in the chat or raise your hand and ask them at the end. Either way is fine. And with that, I'm really so excited to welcome Senator Emily Alvarado from the 34th Legislative District. Senator Alvarado was the sponsor and champion of rent stabilization. She has been working this bill for many years, along with Representative Nicole Macri, who will be joining us shortly. She is a most excellent housing champion. She's also a great speaker. If you've ever heard her speak at a rally, it's just like so exciting. So I'm really glad she's here. And with that, let's get started. So we're going to talk a lot about rent stabilization, obviously. So after years of work from legislators and advocates, we finally, the legislature finally passed rent stabilization this year, and it was signed into law by the governor. What does that mean for low-income people in King County and across Washington?
Well, hi, Hallie. Thanks for having me. Good to see you, Allison. Hello, Coalition on Homelessness. Love joining this group. Good to be here. Okay, so you started off saying we passed rent stabilization. This is a friendly group, so we're going to be totally honest here. We proposed a rent stabilization bill. We passed a very important anti-gouging bill for the state of Washington. And I do think there is a distinction, but nevertheless, it was a huge win. What this means for Washington is that renters, tenants in residential housing can't get more than a 7+ CPI up to 10, so 10% rent increase each year. If you're a manufactured homeowner, you can't get more than a 5% increase each year. And what it also means for Washington is that we got to a place where the public and legislators recognize that reasonable rent regulations are necessary for a fair housing market. And I think that is really a significant win. That's what we've been fighting for so long, is to say that market forces on their own are not working for people, and that putting guardrails on a market when it's intending to deliver a basic human need for folks is essential. And we made that progress, and we have that in law now, which I think is a really, really important thing to build off of. We also, and it's worth noting, that this law allows for Attorney General enforcement. I had hoped that we would have Consumer Protection Act enforcement, but hey, you know, this is a start. But we now can get our team at the AG's office to really investigate and explore the kind of behaviors that are happening in the housing market in a way we haven't had them involved before. So I think that's a win for renters and manufactured homeowners in Washington. The other piece that we should celebrate is that this bill, unlike a lot of others, was really about people power. This was 100% about movement building over the years of advocates and regular folks who just came and shared stories and demanded change. And you know, we were up against moneyed special interests who did absolutely everything possible to kill this bill. But what happened was a groundswell of advocacy, of coordinated advocacy, that not only, you know, helped move the bill, but held elected officials accountable, that made the public so invested in this issue that there was broad public and political accountability. Don't know if anyone saw the bill signing from the governor, but he remarked on how everywhere he went, people would say, random people, not paid lobbyists or advocates, but people would say, my rent went up, what are you doing about it? And I think that level of advocacy is essential. So on those pieces, we made tremendous progress. We actually put a rent regulation in place that says there's a place for common sense rent regulations. 2, we got an enforcement regime that can help to make sure we're protecting renters. And 3, we showed that the power of the people can not only the power of the people can win.
That is such an excellent, excellent description of how advocacy mattered through this process. And as you mentioned, the bill that we wound up with was really different from the bill that we started a handful of years ago, or even that we started with this session. So what can you tell us about sort of the compromises that went into this and the journey that this bill went through the legislative session?
Yeah, I mean, lots of compromises and quite a journey. Compromise is always part of the legislative process. And I think we fought hard and as hard as we could to keep key pieces of the bill in place and intact. But you know, we had to make compromises to get something across the finish line. And at some point, I think it's important for all of us to get a law in place, take the win, and figure out what a long-term strategy looks like to make improvements as we see that they're necessary in community. But getting this passed was crucial. And I think there's always time to make things better. What I could say about the compromises that were made is that, one, it was really important to have multiple champions for this legislation. so that people were hearing voices of different lawmakers who wanted to see this move forward, because some of the compromises that people thought we would make frustrated different lawmakers at different times, and that was important. It gave us more power that way. So from an advocacy perspective, it's good to have a couple of champions. It's really important to have a broad group of legislative champions who will go to bat and who have different personal interests. You know, one of the policy changes that I was devastated that passed on the Senate floor, in a total surprise to me and to others, was exemption of single-family homes. Well, quite frankly, to many of our rural lawmakers who wanted this policy passed, that was not okay for them. And it was helpful to have more rural lawmakers who could say, this excluding single-family homes is not acceptable to us. So I think creating a coalition of lawmaker advocates who bring different perspectives to the table was very helpful in this case. Yeah.
And that is such a great example of the, you know, on the Senate floor, there was this amendment that removed single family homes, but that actually got added back in later in the process. So just want to lift that up for folks that there was a lot of advocacy around that. As Senator Alvarado said, there were a lot of lawmakers that were unhappy with that change that actually got fixed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? Yeah.
It was a good lesson in never give up. You know, we have to keep fighting, keep finding different ways to advocate. I think the coalition and broader coalition of advocates did an incredible job of getting editorials and op-eds out there, of contacting lawmakers, of doing last-minute rallies on the Capitol steps, all of those different components that made the difference up until the last, the final day of session. You know, I talked to a lawmaker who had a hard time on this bill, wasn't sure how they were going to vote, especially given that the business lobbyists who are highly compensated to spend their life standing outside the door of the Senate talking to people, you know, and if that's who you see all the time, it becomes difficult for some folks. But this lawmaker said to me, I went outside and there were two constituents who told me about their rent going up over 10% 3 years in a row. And the lawmaker said, I can't not vote for it. You can count on my vote. And again, like we think, I know it's hard to go down to Olympia. I know it feels like you're just throwing your story into the wind time and time again, but we see the cases where it really makes the difference, especially in those tough final days.
That's such an amazing example. And I want to like print that out and put it on my wall or something, because it does sometimes feel like that for a lot of us. Like, you know, we tell these stories and we show up and we're not sure how it's landing with people. So that's really heartening to hear that that it matters as much as it does. So you mentioned that, you know, this bill took a long time to make its way through the legislature. I think Representative Macri introduced it in 2019. Is that right?
2018 is
18?
I think.
Yeah. So this took many, many years to make it to passage. What do you want advocates to know about, like, how can we sustain that energy? How can we build off of this momentum now that this has passed, and keep working a bill year after year after year?
Well, you know, I think there are a few things that I would put out there, especially in these times. As Representative Scott said, we have some really challenging times ahead with what is happening with federal proposed cuts in federal action. And I think that's really true for housing and homelessness. I mean, the proposed cuts will decimate the housing and homelessness system and will really harm humans. I think we will see a tremendous increase in homelessness and destabilization and poverty. And it is going to take a really concerted and coordinated effort to play defense, figuring out what resources we can get at the state to backfill if necessary. Figuring out how we not only backfill, but we think about longer term and dedicated funding sources that can serve our needs on housing and homelessness. So I think we need a defense strategy, but we also need an offense strategy that goes along with it. And we have to be the people who not only are anti-Trump, but who are pro a vision of our future where everyone has their basic needs met. And who knows what exactly that, what are the policies that are part of that proactive vision? I'm always willing to throw out a couple of my things that I'm obsessed with. I think we have to do something better on seniors. When you look at who is becoming homeless at record rates, it's older adults. The compounding impacts of cuts to food assistance and Medicaid and housing assistance is just gonna really harm older adults. And I do think that we could imagine what the state could do that we've never done before as it relates to helping seniors have stable housing. Just as a connected issue too, we hear a lot about boomers not wanting to leave their homes. Boomers who have more resources maybe not wanting to leave their homes, and that's really blocking up the homeownership market for folks. And it's like, well, people can't leave their homes because there's no viable way to downsize and stabilize in this country and in this state. And if we had a vision for senior housing that was broader and inclusive, and I think we really could do something that not only helps people on the margins, but that helps the entire housing and community ecosystem. So I'll throw that out there, but maybe that's not the thing. But we do need aggressive defense right now, and we need to start flooding the zone with more ideas of what it looks like to be better. And I will say, and Hallie, you'll cut me off anytime I'm talking too much because I love taking questions, but I will say that part of why rent stabilization ultimately was successful is because I think, was because, Democrats in the legislature started giving a name for how we address our housing crisis broadly. And we had strategies around supply and strategies around subsidy and strategies around stabilization. And year after year, we were making progress in the supply side and some progress in the subsidy and no progress in the stabilization. And so it created some more shared accountability that if here is our agenda of what it looks like to fix housing, but we're failing on this one piece, we got to bring this across the finish line. And so I ask us again, what does it look like to build out those policy packages that force accountability on bringing everything across the finish line over a couple of years? And I think that's necessary on our work on addressing and alleviating poverty and on housing. Ooh, lots of good questions coming in on the chat.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think those are all so important. And I saw that Representative McRae just joined. And so we'll wrap up with just one last question for now, and then we'll take folks' questions at the end. What else do you want people to know about what happened this session or what your priorities are going forward?
Well, I want people to know that Representative Macri is incredible. This is my tee off to her. You know, this was an incredibly challenging budget year. And those of us who are not appropriators didn't have to deal with as much with the really life and death decisions that were being made about what gets cut, what gets invested in. And Representative Macri, having someone who writes the budget, who has an unwavering commitment to low-income people and to folks experiencing homelessness, and a vision towards making those investments is part of what saved us. But we have so much more work to go forward, including figuring out how we actually, like Representative Scott said, get the progressive revenue that we need to make longer term, more sustainable investments, and count me in as a partner in working on that. So when Rep Macri gets on, you should give her a round of applause.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Senator Alvarado. And if you're able to stick around for questions at the end, that'd be great. And with that, I don't think I need to do any work because Senator Alvarado did it for me. Very happy to welcome Representative Nicole Macri from my alma mater, the 43rd.
Hello, it's great to be here, and I am really sorry that I missed the previous comments from Rep. Scott and Senator Alvarado. They are amazing partners in this work. Can you all hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you just fine.
It's a little bit of a challenge with my computer microphone.
Yeah.
It's just amazing to be here. I'll start, as I always do, by saying, you know, I have such a deep love and appreciation for this coalition among all coalitions, because I really got my start in advocacy and in political work because of this coalition. You all are a force. Your collective power makes a big difference. And we see that again and again at the local level and certainly at the state level. So thank you so, so much. Haley, I think you have some questions for me. You want me to?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about the budget because you were instrumental in crafting this year's budget. And there was, as Representative Scott said earlier, there was historic amounts of new revenue raised in this budget, like many times whatever the legislature has done before. But there was also billions of dollars in cuts. Can you explain, like, what does that mean, especially for housing and homelessness, and how did we get here?
Yeah. So just very high level, big picture. The numbers kind of changed over time, but you may have heard of this sort of $12 to $16 billion shortfall. That is over a 4-year period. Why there's a $4 billion kind of range has to do with sort of what you count as the shortfall. As Democrats, we count the fact that the cost to continue to operate government, including ensuring that state workers are paid adequately, as part of that shortfall. And so starting with that kind of $16 billion range, there were both significant increases in revenue and significant cuts. About 9-ish billion in new revenue, $7 billion in cuts. The drivers for new expenses in the budget mostly had to do with what we call the maintenance level. So our base budget, our ability to deliver government services, the cost of those services has just gone up, and the demand for those services has also gone up. So more kids in public school, more families discovering and that they're eligible for the Working Families Tax Credit and accessing it, more folks taking advantage of the Washington College Grant to attend college, et cetera. So because there's been more demand, or as we say, the technical term, caseloads are rising, and the fact that it costs more money to deliver all those services, the state budget has been growing. In terms of the things that are directly related to responding to homelessness, and then all those sort of adjacent investments from the state, I'll start by saying housing and homelessness was one of the few areas in the state budget where we did invest additional dollars. We did so really in a way to protect against loss of services. So while these are new state investments, they're kind of repeats or extensions of previous one-time funding. A lot of them were made possible because of House Bill 1858, which I believe you discussed when Rep. Scott talked about the session. So closing that exemption on bank-to-bank transfers and document recording fee provided significant new dedicated resource for homelessness response. The biggest area of new funding in the homelessness response area was in what we call local government stability or local government funding backfill for decreased forecasts of that document recording fee. We solicited information from counties around the state about what they needed to sustain service levels. The Homeless Coalition was a key partner in pulling together folks here in King County so we could get good numbers from King County. Because it takes a little bit. I think we may have some folks here from local government, but we've got multiple actors in King County funding homelessness services. So it took quite a bit of work to figure it out. The state funding will not fully backfill what communities need, but it goes a lot further than our ability to backfill in many other areas of the budget. That's in part because we took an approach in writing our budget to focus on food, shelter, and health, and protecting access to food, shelter, and health for the most vulnerable Washingtonians as a key approach to our budget writing. We also were able to continue what was previously one-time homeless youth diversion funding, which are flexible funds that we have found to be essential to helping young people maintain housing stability or quickly get out of homelessness. We also extended one-time increases in the tenant right to counsel program. So this is an essential program to assist low-income people who are facing eviction. And we have found tremendous results in people's ability to be able to retain their housing versus before we had the program. The challenge is the demand is skyrocketing. The rates of eviction are extremely high at historic levels. And the most common reason for eviction, legal eviction, is non-payment of rent. And there, is a correlation there with the high cost of rent, which I think you got a good a presentation from Senator Alvarado about our efforts to stabilize rents over time. So those are some investments specific to homelessness. The other area where we continued or increased funding was in food security and assistance, $128 million in investments for food security. We also continued investments for immigrant, refugee, and new arrivals, particularly issue of asylum seekers here in King County and around the state. We also invested additional dollars in the Community Reinvestment Program, which is a program that got off the ground last biennium and is intended to enhance community resiliency and community safety by investing directly into community programs that reduce youth violence, and respond to community need. And we did a new investment of $110 million over 4 years for the Community Reinvestment Program. And that just goes to a variety of community-based organizations across the state. Some of them are related to housing stability, many of them are not, but there certainly is an intersection in the work that many members of the coalition do. There's some bad stuff too that I think is important to note, and you all are aware of. There is an article actually today in Cascade PBS, with the formerly known as Crosscut, about the delay of the 100% child support pass-through to TANF recipients. That's a really great policy that we passed last year to stop this harmful practice of the state taking families' child support payment, all but $50 in order to maintain their TANF eligibility. We set out the intent to end that practice in 2026. We delayed the implementation date for that until 2029. And that was a very difficult decision. We also delayed stopping another harmful practice that we have done, which is recovering people's ABD payments after they receive their federal disability. So the ABD, or Age Blind Disabled program, is a program that presumes people will be eligible for federal disability. It is a very long process to sign up for SSI, or Social Security disability payments, and the federal government allows states that provide these presumptive cash benefit programs to then recapture their state dollars when the SSI or SSDI back payment is made to a new enrollee. Senator Alvarado actually led on the policy for us to stop that practice. We had enacted that a couple years ago with the intent to stop that practice in 2026, and we also pushed that out to 2029. Together, that is a cost savings to the budget of about $170 million over 4 years. Those are both policies that I hope will be high on our list to revisit when we look at making choices about how we spend new dollars in the future. There were also some you could say we protected some things in behavioral health, or we cut some things less than we could have. I will say we did continue to invest in the 988 crisis line program as we continue to ramp that up. We did do across the board Medicaid rate cuts, both in physical and behavioral health, and I assume we will start to feel that. They were very modest 1% cuts, but they will have an impact on access to care. We also reduced the Recovery Navigator program, here locally often known as the LEAD program, by 20% across the state. We did include intent language to encourage local communities that are benefiting from these interventions, these diversion interventions, to work to invest locally in these programs, but that was a cut. The Medicaid rate cut and the Recovery Navigator together were about a $45 million cut over 4 years. We were able to maintain our Apple Health Expansion program for immigrant residents of the state. That was really a great victory for us to be able to do that. And we did continue to provide subsidies for people who get health care through WashingtonHealthCareFinder.org who may not be eligible for Medicaid. So for people who are up to 250% of the federal poverty line, opportunity to get a subsidy to get premium-free health insurance. So those were important things that we were able to maintain, but as I mentioned, there were pretty harmful cuts as well.
Thank you so much for really spelling that out for folks. I really appreciate you highlighting, the the massive, massive effort that went into being able to sustain a lot of our homelessness services, but also um, the cuts and the compromises that had to be made, which were just really, really gutting. And I just want to say that, like, we really appreciate you and all of your colleagues who worked on the budget for putting as much work in as you did to be able to sustain as much as possible the things that our most vulnerable community members need. So as we're thinking about, going into next session, what do you think are some of your highest priorities for housing and homelessness?
Yeah. I failed to mention there was another cut that we made, or it's a sort of a technical account for the Apple Health and Homes program, which is a program to ensure that disabled people have access to housing, a program that a former Representative Chop championed. That account had about $22 million remaining, and $15 million was transferred to the general fund to maintain many of these other programs. And so new, particularly supportive housing projects coming online that would have been eligible for that Apple Health and Homes dollars, those dollars are not there. So that will be another challenge, particularly as we think about how we continue to respond to growing demand for these kinds of services. So as we go into next session, I think really looking at where we made cuts, are there things that we can bring back? And secondly, where we know the demand is growing, where we may have put in some effort on the capital budget side to build more supply of affordable subsidized housing for folks, we need to make sure that we have investments on the operating side. The other thing I think we'll be really mindful about is how the federal government's actions are impacting residents of the state. Now, I will be just very honest to say the state is not in a position to backfill the dramatic decreases in resources and responses that we're hearing is the intent of the current president and majorities in Congress. So you probably have read about proposed cuts, dramatic cuts to the HUD budget, dramatic cuts to Medicaid and to SNAP food assistance. The state will not be in a position to fully backfill that, but we need to be assessing where the greatest harm from those federal cuts, how they might come down the pike, and how we need to respond to them. I also want to be clear, the revenue forecasts for the state are continuing to look fairly grim. And so there are the new revenue bills that we passed this session, but we are going to need to continue to work on creating more equity in our tax code in order to be able to respond to these growing needs and the shifting from the federal government to states. And so, I'll say that on the very last day of session, the state Senate sent over to us, and you probably heard this already from Rep. Scott or Senator Alvarado, that the state Senate passed out the wealth tax to the House. It was on the last day, so there was no time for it to go through the legislative process in the House. But what it means is the wealth tax now sits in Senate rules, and it is ready at any moment when we are reconvened for the Senate to just take action on that bill from the Senate floor and send it to the House for us to work on that. So House and Senate Democrats have been very clear in our intent about the need to ensure that the needs of Washingtonians are met, that we take a balanced approach, and progressive revenue will continue to be a part of that conversation. So those are some things I look forward to. I think we'll continue to be in a protect and defend mode. And I believe that continued engagement about progressive revenue is going to be essential to our ability to do that.
Thank you so much, Rep. Macri. That's a really important reminder that bills will start off next session, like basically where they left off this year. So that wealth tax or financial intangibles tax is going to be a really, really important one. I do want to move us to audience questions. So if folks have any questions, please do raise a hand and I'll take a look at the chat as well. While folks are thinking, there was a question earlier from Justin for Senator Alvarado. I'm really concerned about the potential of Section 8 vouchers being cut. Is that a real possibility?
Well, who knows? I mean, I think anything at the federal level is a real possibility nowadays. Things we once thought were not possible at all have become possible. So I think we should treat the president's proposed budget as real and be prepared to activate and respond. As it relates to Section 8 vouchers, I will say, we know that if it's true that you move towards block granting rental assistance at the state level, that will automatically result in a loss of vouchers. So just the process of block granting will mean there will be cuts. And beyond that, something I'm really concerned about is, there are private market landlord advocates who will, I imagine, become activated if there are real large cuts to housing choice vouchers, which will help us. But in Washington state, we have a lot of project-based vouchers that are the backbone, the operating subsidy behind our affordable housing, specifically for more vulnerable folks. And I worry about the threats to project-based vouchers where there are fewer, that the advocacy coalition is more narrow for folks who support those. And vouchers are project-based more in higher cost, bluer cities in this country. So my eyes on that and what we do. When I mentioned seniors before, again, this is like, what is our subsidy strategy for some of these buildings who I think could be at threat? The other thing federally is that there was a proposal and talk about repackaging some COC funding into the ESG program, which would effectuate the administration's vision on defunding housing first and moving towards investments that would really starve some of our key providers here in Washington state who do the work of providing supportive housing in a way that evidence shows us is successful. So we got to keep an eye on that. And I think there was one, and the local plan on if there is a huge HUD budget cut, I think as Representative Macri said, we're in this housing mess because the feds bailed on us on housing however many years ago. And we've tried and tried to come up with the local and now the state resources. We just don't have the scale that the feds have. So I think the impacts will be devastating. We need to be loud. We need to be coordinated. We'll do the best we can locally. And we need to start building some broader coalitions on who are interested in preserving these resources, because from the impacts will be felt by many, many people in our communities and by our communities at large.
Thank you, Senator Alvarado. Allison, did you want to jump in?
Well, I mean, clearly the situation at the federal level is the thing that we need to focus on, as Senator Alvarado, Representative Macri, and Representative Scott have all acknowledged, and as the questions and profound anxiety in our coalition tell us. We will absolutely be inviting people to continue to show up at Federal Building Fridays, to take action. Hallie and I and some others have just been inviting all of the members of our congressional delegation to sign on to a robust THUD, dear colleague letter to Senator Murray to ensure a really significant investment in the budget in fiscal year 2026 at the federal level. But we know that there will be multiple attempts to destroy and undermine. I think that we're going to probably invite some of these lawmakers back to have some conversation about what are the most effective ways to respond and protect as much as possible at the local level. I think we do need to take a short minute to speak about Tent City 4 and a very local issue that is related to the siting issues that House Bill 1195, which will also be coming back next session, are intended to address. But I saw a hand come up from Representative Scott, so I want to just hold for a moment and give you a chance to say whatever was on your mind about our federal crisis.
Yeah, absolutely, Allison. Thank you so much. I just wanted to add a sort of shade of emphasis. I mean, I think that there are a lot of people in our state who are having a very difficult time seeing the difference between some of the policies that emerged from Washington, D.C. this year and those that came from the governor's office in Washington state. The climate that we were working in was one where we had an uncollaborative partner in the executive office on staving off some of the cuts that we've been describing. When there was a threatened public employee furlough that was, gestured to have been one of the governor's priorities. Other huge cuts to programs that, were about moving the goalposts midway through the legislative session, where first it was $4 billion worth of cuts, then it was $6 billion. Then, the number that he would have preferred to have seen went north even of that. So I think there's actually a lot that we can do, I think, to make sure that we're holding, executives wherever they might reside, possible or accountable for not making it very easy on a lot of legislators and on a lot of lawmakers and doing right by the people. There's a lot that we can be doing right here in our state to make sure that we're pushing back against the same kind of austerity that I think we've been seeing from Washington, D.C. as well. So I just wanted to make sure that that was something that we mulled as a coalition space moving forward too.
Thank you so much. Yes, absolutely. It is sometimes difficult. I always appreciate something that Representative Scott wrote and shared before he was elected to public office about the employee hours tax situation in Seattle a number of years ago. It was a very powerful essay, which included the exhortation to all of us to make sure that when you're angry at the right people. But I also think it's important for us to apply the right kind of pressure to the right people, because we have many allies, and I will say that includes elected officials in the city of Seattle right now who do care about increasing affordable housing and reducing the number of people who experience the traumas and trials of homelessness, who are nevertheless putting obstacles in the way and refusing to raise the truly progressive revenue that we need to make progress locally, even in the face of appalling threats and cuts at the federal level. So I think many people are aware of the situation in Lake City, where about 100 residents of Tent City 4 were expecting and planning to move, as they always do, by their lease end date. They're currently at the Mennonite Church up in Lake City, and their expectation was to move to a parcel of city-owned public land that will shortly be redeveloped for affordable housing, which is terrific. There are a lot of bureaucratic reasons that have been given why that public land is not available. And I am here to share with all of you the fact that not a single one of those reasons is compelling or legitimate. what I have been asking people, and honestly, I've been, Hallie and our team know this, I've been trying to write this and get it out as an email for 48 hours, but it's been that crazy. What I've been asking people is the following question. When is the last time the city of Seattle sited and opened a new shelter? I've asked this question of high-level officials, of my colleagues, and of everybody in between. No one can answer that question because it's been years. And part of the reason it has been years is that for some people, the community engagement process or community notification process has become a veto process, whether publicly or behind the scenes, and it is unacceptable. And we, of course, stand in solidarity with the residents of Tent City 4 who are Lake City residents, with Share and Wheel, and with the many, many people, including staff at KCRHA, staff at the City Human Services Department, staff in other places who have been working to make this transition smooth and easy, because that's the easy stuff. Opposing the reconciliation bill that is barreling through Congress is the hard stuff. And we need to do the easy stuff fast so that we can focus our collective energies and intelligence and resources on the hard stuff. So you will be hearing a lot more about this. We expect to head up to City Hall to join the folks from Tent City 4 shortly. Please take action. The Transit Riders Union has an action alert out. Share Wheel has information on their Facebook page. We will be sending an action alert out. And the fact is, you've just heard from 3 of the most brilliant and dedicated public servants, both the good and the harsh realities. And that's where we are, and that's what we have to move forward from. We are so profoundly grateful to the 3 of you for bringing your knowledge, experience, and genuine leadership to the public sector, to taking hard decisions, which we know are hard because we know you, and to never giving up, to keeping the people for whom the policies are made at the heart of your work. We thank you. We're going to thank everyone on this call once again. This is our annual membership meeting, and we are a membership-driven, community-powered coalition because of all of you and with all of you. Juneteenth is a federal holiday, and we observe it, which means that our June membership meeting is June 12th. So Kevin has just dropped the link in there. We are a tiny bit over. We don't want to keep you all, but we want to just send you off with gratitude and appreciation and just huge respect to everyone on this call, electeds and not, for the work that you do on behalf of and with this community. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.